VenomousStare returns with another classic Starcraft Brood War video. This time we have the best player of all time, Flash, in the bottom left of Roa, facing off against the best Protoss player of all time, Bisu. So this is certain to be an incredibly entertaining knuckle duster, and as far as the era goes, this is right before the StarCraft 2 beta came out, so this is February of 2010. The StarCraft 2 beta came out in March of 2010. So the context, this is obviously a Pro League series, and the player Hyuk went up 3-0 and was going for the all-kill against Flash, and Flash beat him. So KT Rolster is down 1-3, but it is of course the all-kill format, and immediately SKT1 sent out one of their heaviest hitters, Bisu. Now, if you don't know who Bisu is, he's the best Protoss player ever. He's the fastest Protoss player ever. He does things with Protoss Micro that shouldn't be possible. Whenever we watch players on this channel, frequently I will describe them as macro players, players who grind their opponents down through methodical macro play and not getting supply blocked, hitting their upgrade timings, making enough production facilities, making plenty of workers. But there are things that players like Bisu can do in the game that are sort of brilliant. And they're brilliant in a way that is nearly impossible to replicate. Like I saw this clip of Bisu microing Dragoons against spider mines without an observer, and using hold position micro to kill the spider mine after it popped out of the ground. That's Flash on the right, Bisu on the left. And Bisu is just insanely good, and he's so talented and absolutely at the top of his game, and was really that way his entire career. Just an absolutely terrifying, scary player that revolutionized the Verse Zerg matchup. He invented this thing called the Bisu build, where you went Corsair DT, and ZVP was in a really terrible spate before that, and Protoss really struggled. And because Bisu came out with the Bisu build, it allowed Protoss to get into the mid game without relying on things like corny little 2-gate timings. A Dragoon is out here. Flash's factory has finished. He has an SCV with some Jim Rayners at the top of the ramp. So until this Dragoon gets across the map, it's not really going to be an issue. Bisu has still not expanded. He's going to park a Dragoon at the top of his ramp, which leads me to believe he is going to expand very soon. Flash is starting to maneuver a route on the map with the Marines. And as far as my lack of casting goes, I got really sick and I've been busy IRL as we see a robo started here for Bisu, but expect more regular uploads in perpetuity here. Zealot running around the map, and Roa is sort of a weird map that resembles Python to some extent. As the Raxes floated over, half dozen Marines are out, and Flash might have been considering to proxy something with that scouting SCV, considering the weird spot that it's in, or maybe he was just thinking about a delayed scout. Command Center starts for the ultimate weapon. Bisu massing up around the 12 o'clock, the mouth of his natural depot starting here for Flash as the Robo is finishing for Bisu, and Goon Range is also wrapping up for Bisu. But I don't really like to call Bisu like a micro player, something like a guy like Marine King who was all about micro. Like his micro was spectacular and revolutionary, but he's also an incredible macro player and an incredible thinking player, as Flash fails to get a worker in, and unfortunately for him is unable to see whether or not Bisu expanded. And that's a very important piece of information, whether or not TOS is expanded. And if you're brand new to the game and don't really understand why, it's because if a player is still on one base at this time in the game, it means they're massing a ton of units and they're about to all-in the shit out of you. Or they're proxying tech somewhere, or they've straight up hidden their first base, which is extremely abnormal. Because it's very easy to take your natural expansion in StarCraft. That's why they call it the natural. I mean, even back in the way old days, the natural would usually be takeable. Now the third base, forget about it. Like the fourth base, there might not even be a fourth base as Bisu tries to sneak a probe in and Flash deflects it. Flash running around with the Vulture at the 1 o'clock, seeing the lack of base, saying, okay, I'm not too far behind. If you don't know, Protoss often plays the Zerg role in this matchup in terms of base timing. They want to be a base ahead of Terran. It's very difficult for Terran to punish Protoss in this matchup, in terms of denying them bases through the early mid-game and the mid-game. Really all Terran can do is vulture harass. And vultures, like Hellions, are very poor at killing buildings, and they're really all about killing workers and laying mines in the retreat path. One of the best things you can do as Terran is run vultures up to a third of the Protoss and lay some mines on the ramp. Then as you're killing workers, they'll maneuver their army around from their natural to their third, usually on the opposite corner of the map, and after you've cleared the mineral line and continue to pressure the base, they will run their army through the minefield. Mines in general are used for zone control in this game, but they can also be used in conjunction for harassment. As observers have been made for Bisu, he's seen Flash's army, he's seen Flash's main, and he already has a citadel almost done. Pylon wall up at the third base location, but the third not started yet. Bisu picking away at this mixed force from Flash. And a lot of times if Terran moves out with the mixed force, Marines and tanks, they really want to get the Marines out in front, doing the most damage they really can, because the Marines fall off spectacularly in this matchup. When the Goons get range and the Zealots get speed, they start to lose value, and Bisu kiting away beautifully here, and more Goons join the fray. An Observer is out here, so no mine shenanigans can occur, but Bisu losing about half of his Goons, picking, walking backwards. This is a very tense moment for Bisu, but this is what you want to do as Protoss. You don't want to let Terran get all the way to your natural and siege up. Bisu's killed about half of Flash's army, but thankfully for Flash, it was mostly the Marines that were killed as a turret starts. 4 Goons are out here for Bisu as a 5th one, and a Zealot comes up. An Observer is out here for Bisu, and the Zealot was ran southbound there. I don't know if you caught that, to try to drag the mines. A couple more mines are placed there, but an Observer is out. Flash, the ultimate weapon, trying to prevent his team from being all killed, and he already did that. Now he's trying to do an all kill of his own, as in this exciting 5th map of the series. Bisu and Flash, 2 of the best ever, doing battle. Vulture screaming into the natural, and another turret is going up. Repair occurring on the siege tank. Flash has all the momentum in the world. Dragoons at the top of the ramp getting splattered, and Flash has so much momentum, and he has Bisu at death's door here, as we really see why the ultimate weapon was so powerful, as he does a lethal 2-base push, preventing Bisu from taking his third. And even though Bisu never started the third and saw that push coming, and didn't even bother trying to hold the third and went straight for units, it still wasn't enough. And it's always great in StarCraft whenever a player makes the appropriate reaction based on scouting, but the other guy's so brilliant that the player who's doing the main brilliant moves can still win, as Bisu is choked out of his natural here. This is a Pro League game. Bisu's going to fight, he's going to scrap, he's going to claw, he's going to give it everything he has, but with no third base out on the map, Bisu is toast. Vultures up on the high ground as tanks are repositioning on the low. Great observer use here for Bisu throughout the game, but Flash hit him with the brutal timing with perfect micro. And I love to see the mid-game portion of the game, as Bisu's about to type out here, I think, where Bisu was picking with Dragoons, and we saw beautiful micro displayed by Bisu. We really got to see the micro that made him great, but it just wasn't enough. It's one of these brilliant exchanges in StarCraft where both players are playing brilliantly and really showing off what made them famous, as we got to see Bisu's great micro and Flash's great macro sort of come to a head, as Flash is starting to butcher probes in the main. Bisu broke some tanks down on the low ground there, but with a lot of volts in the main, Bisu types out, and Flash will take the dub there. So the ultimate weapon in this best of 7 would go on to beat Fantasy and Best after this. 2 top-end players to complete the reverse sweep and the reverse all kill. And this was sort of the turning point of the series. You might say like Hyuk losing game 4 was the turning point, but really, whenever you send your heaviest hitter out to stop a guy who you know is going to get momentum if you don't shut him down early, I think that's the tipping off point, and it's not a guy who is sort of paying above his normal level or pay grade being stopped by the best player ever. In other words, like, you don't expect Hyuk to beat Flash no matter how strong he looks that day. really it's like Bisu who you rely on to beat Flash. And really part of the appeal of these old Pro League matches was it's a lot like an anime in many instances. You know, you're watching Dragon Ball Z, two squads roll up to each other and they send representatives out. Well, if your most talented representative goes down, if he loses, all of a sudden the complexion of the series completely changes. And whenever you have a guy who is god tier like Flash, be able to just completely change the game and switch the momentum of a series, it made for some of the most interesting all kills and compelling Pro League series ever. Another guy like that is Jadong. Another guy like that is Bisu. So we got to see Flash and Bisu face off here. And I want to go to that mid game portion where he's fighting back with the goons. Okay, here it is. So this is one of the really cool things about Brood War is he scouts this push, and even though like in theory he should like, oh, I need to start a third so I can have a base ahead, he knows that, okay, I'm playing Flash, this push is going to be incredibly lethal, I need to save the 400 minerals that I would use to start the base against almost every other player, because you don't want to be even in bases in this matchup if you're Protoss, you want to be a base ahead. That's why I said they sort of played the Zerg role. And one thing that's really brilliant about Flash's micro here is he leads with the SCVs and workers, or excuse me, he leads with the workers and marines. At this point in the ZVP, they have about as much value as each other, let's be honest. But he doesn't just like move them forward as the tanks sag behind. Notice that he's consistently like pulling the workers back after they sponge some damage. Like a lot of guys would just like move the workers and the marines here as like they made the siege tanks sort of leapfrog forward with the vultures, but Flash is preserving every unit, getting every little amount of value he can. And whenever it gets to this part of the map, Bisu sort of says to himself like, well shit, like if I let all those tanks get to my base, I'm just going to get choked out. So he makes a decision to dive for one of the tanks, but Flash's micro is so good and his macro so good. In other words, he has so much stuff and he's never missing unit producing cycles that it puts Bisu in the spot where he has way more stuff than it seems like he should. Flash has more units than other Terran players do at that point in the game. Now, this is one of the toughest things you can ever play against in Starcraft. As a truly committed macro player at the top of their game who is really putting the pedal to the metal and just out macroing you. Even if you're a hard committed macro player who isn't afraid to go toe to toe with some of the best macro players in the world like Bisu, you watch this game and it's like, Jesus, like this is why they call Flash the ultimate weapon. He's so good, and a DT gets out there for Bisu, but that's really no problem as Flash deflects that too. So Flash completes the reverse sweep in the series. Sub for more.